Let's compare the Iranian and the U.S. ability. The U.S. is essentially used up most of its available missiles, its bombs, its missile launchers. It's cut back its airplanes. It's afraid to move its Navy within shooting distance of Iran. So the United States has lost its military power to compel. That's why Trump said, well, the Army says, I can't invade on land to grab Karg Island or to grab the uranium. We tried that and it failed. So if I can't have a military invasion like we had it in such a nice operation in Venezuela, and if I can't just bomb them because they have their anti-aircraft radars that are going to shoot down our planes and the refuelers, and we'll lose our aircraft, and it's not going to knock them out anyway because Iran's defenses and Iran's whole administrative network is so decentralized, then we have only one solution, the atom bomb. That's why he asked on Saturday, give me the atom bomb codes. I don't see why the rest of the world doesn't say where this is going to lead, because way back in the 1970s, when I worked with Herman Kahn, the Hudson Institute, it was all about working out what the sequence of political and military responses would be to an atom bomb, and it pretty much means that everybody's going to need one. And you'd think, I mean, the joke is that in trying to prevent the fiction, the pretense that Iran was trying to get an atom bomb, now everybody realizes we need an atom bomb. If we don't have our own atom bomb, Israel can bomb us. Israel is the only country in the world that's permitted to have 200 atom bombs to use against whoever it wants. We can't. So we need 200 countries. We all need them too. This is the double standard that's occurred. And again, countries are not taking steps to isolate the United States and Israel and say, look, if you're going to go down this route of threatening the atom bomb, if you don't get to control of the world oil trade, to weaponize it and use it as a choke point, to say we can't get oil unless we succumb to your foreign policy and agree to shift our investment in our major industries into the United States as a center, that you're going to force us into a depression by cutting us off from oil. If you're offering, threatening exactly what Iran has anticipated for the threat. So the U.S. military doesn't have an ability to do anything to really conquer Iran. All it can do is bomb it. And the Iranians have, despite what Trump says, their navy's not destroyed, maybe half of it is. Their aircraft is not destroyed, maybe half of it is. The missile launchers are not destroyed. What were destroyed were the balloons that they bought from China and inflated to look like missile launchers, which were bombed. That Trump said we've destroyed all of their missile launchers. So Iran is in a much stronger military position defensively, and Iran's not an offensive power. The only countries that Iran can threaten are its Arab neighbors in West Asia. It's not going to be a world power in the sense that America, or Russia, or China is a military power. It's not going to be an investment power itself, because it's been stripped of its foreign means of investment. It's not even going to be a major trade power. What is giving it all the power that it has is the moral power that it's got, saying we are not going to stand up for letting the United States become the world's dictator and using oil trade, food trade, the dollar as weapons against other countries to maintain one-sided exploitative control over them. We're not going to let that happen, and somebody has to draw the line, and it's Iran that has drawn the line. That's what its moral power is, and other countries really don't have any choice except either to tell Iran, you're right, we have to make a change. We have to stop this aggression by the United States and Israel to say, we will destroy your economy either militarily or economically if you don't do what we want, or they'll isolate themselves from the United States and Israel by going their own way. And essentially that means isolating the United States until it ends its military and financial attempt to weaponize everything that it does in every economic and social activity.
Would you say Iran stepping up against the US reflects a broader shift, where a declining power begins to weaponize the global system? And how significant is Iran's leverage, especially through the Strait of Hormuz and its move away from the dollar?
Well, it's not possible they have dollars. They had dollars and the United States has confiscated them. If you have dollars, the United States will immediately steal them, as they stole Russia's $300 billion. The dollar is unusable by any country that wants its own national sovereignty. I want to say, you use the word liberal, and this is a completely misused term in general. The takeoff of the industrial nations, Britain, Germany, the United States, they were not liberal. The word liberal really means neoliberal. It means no government. Liberal means Margaret Thatcher, Ronald Reagan, in today's vocabulary. And it means you have to dismantle all government subsidy of the economy. Instead of the governments running natural monopolies, such as transportation and communications, and providing free schooling and free health care. All that was 19th century. It wasn't it wasn't liberalism. The word they used was socialism in one form or another, or social democracy, perhaps. But they did not use liberalism. They rejected the whole idea of free trade in order for governments to shape the markets so as to prevent rent-seeking, shape the markets to prevent real estate prices from going up by taxing away land rent, to prevent monopolies from taking place, either by things like the Antitrust Act of the Sherman Antitrust Act of 1890 in America and Teddy Roosevelt's trust busting, or better yet, the government will take all of these natural monopolies into public hands, as was done the case from Europe to the United States. The United States with the Erie Canal and on. So and there was a whole doctrine of looking at government capital formation. Public infrastructure investment was a factor of production, but unlike industrial capital or capitalist capital, private sector capital, and industry capital, the aim of government investment was not to make a profit. It was to provide its basic services for key sectors at subsidized rates or even freely, so that you lower the economy's overall cost of doing business. And at the end of all of this, this government control was in finance achieved most clearly in Germany and Central Europe at the end of the 19th century, where the government and industry and the banks moved hand in hand to direct the financial system to provide credit, not to make money financially for financial investors, but to finance capital formation in industry to build factories, largely in the arms-producing industries, of course, but to produce actual industry. Well, there was all of this was what classical political economy was all about. The ideal of the whole political doctrine of industrial capitalism was to minimize economic rent. It was value theory. That's what Ricardo talked about, John Stuart Mill, Karl Marx. They were all talking about how do you keep prices in line with actual cost of production, the value, and get rid of economic rent, which is the excess of market prices over value because of the special privileges that we inherited from medieval European society. The privilege of absentee hereditary land ownership by a landlord aristocracy, the monopolies that were created by international banks from the 14th century on to enable kings to have a revenue to carry their war debts, and general banking to provide credit for economic growth. Well, there was after World War I, all of that plans for how to develop an industrial economy was essentially put aside, and finance replaced industry as the focus of gaining wealth and making a fortune throughout the West. And if you look at today, the most successful economy in terms of growth of production, living standards, is China. And what it's done is exactly the same principle that made the United States wealthy and productive and so dominant in the 19th century. It's kept natural monopolies in the public hand. Transportation is very inexpensive. It's subsidized. Healthcare, education is subsidized. But most of all, China's kept banking in the hands of the government. So the the People's Bank of China will create credit for actual tangible production. Unfortunately, a lot of this has gone into overproduction of real estate, but the idea is you're not going to make loans for financial speculators to borrow money, buy a corporation, and then essentially loot it. And leave it, which is what's happening in the West. And certainly all week long, and for instance, in the Financial Times, Wall Street Journal, there's a discussion to say, well, the major banks and major investment funds that have lent money for private capital formation to take over companies and finance their initiatification, they're downsizing and essentially just looting these companies. We're not letting pension funds cash in their holdings unless they take 50%, 80%, lose all their money because the whole American economy's become a bubble. So when I talked about what's the effect of the energy stopping before, one of the effects is to bring down this whole highly leveraged financial sector, the whole debt leveraged buyouts and the debt pyramid, mainly in the United States. As in the Depression, the United States was the most highly debt leveraged economy. The whole financial sector will be coming down. So what will be destroyed is not only physical output, it's the whole system of financialization that has led the United States to lag so far behind China, for instance, in countries that instead of being liberal, say, well, the government has to play a positive role in providing for certain basic needs and to prevent exploitation. If you don't have a government strong enough to prevent a financial oligarchy from developing, then you're going to end up like the United States, a failed economy, or like Germany and most of Western Europe, a failed economy as a result of their neoliberalism. So I just wanted to be very careful about using that word liberalism. It's a term against government and against socialism specifically. That's what caused the whole reaction against industrial capitalism, because industrial capitalism itself was evolving into socialism, into government playing an increasing role in the economy by investing in infrastructure, by preventing monopolies, by taxing away or preventing land rent and monopoly rent and financial exploitation from occurring. So there's a whole ideological superstructure that has gone by the wayside along with the collapse of production. Ideology is the last thing to go, apparently.